This is the Louie T Network.
Draft Zone. Draft Zone. Draft Zone.
Welcome, you are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on this program, day number 2 of the draft. And I'm a guy that I like to take the totality of everything that occurs. The first round was exhilarating. Teams do a lot of work in the first round. However, I say this all the time. There's 7 rounds in the draft. And so you can have a stellar first round and stink it up the rest of the way. It diminishes what you've done in the first round. And so you've got to be consistent throughout all 7 rounds of the draft, whether it's moving back, picking up additional picks, or moving up and getting a guy that you covet, or just standing pat and making good selections where you are in the draft. There's something to be said about just staying where you are and making good selections. I mean, we laud and praise the 49ers and the Seahawks and all these teams that move around and pick up multiple picks, the Rams. We give them all the praises in the world for moving around, but there's something to be said about the quiet teams like the Packers and the Ravens that don't do a lot of shuffling and moving around. They just pick solid quality players where they're slotted. And if you can do that for 5 of the 7 rounds, you'll be a good football team year in and year out. It's the teams that miss consistently on the draft and trade away picks and miss on guys. They're the ones that find themselves looking for top tier talent in the top 10 of the draft year in and year out. Those are the teams that find it hard to be consistent. So day 2 is a huge day for me because to me, I think, you know how they say 30 is the new 20, 40 is the new 30, 50 is the new 40. Well, the second round's the new first round. I mean, you get yourself first round talent, guys that are day 1 starters in the second round. Hell, you get yourself first round talent in the third round these days. If you're careful enough and you do enough homework, if you find the right fit, you can get yourself first round talent in the third round of the draft. And so to me, I value second and third round picks just as much as I value a first round pick. You can't give those away anymore. You used to be able to give away a third round pick and feel good about it. You can't give those away anymore. And so you have to be just as consistent in day 2 and day 3 as you are in day 1 if you want to be a good football team. These later rounds, day 3, rounds 4 through 7, that's when you fill out your roster. That's when your special teams unit becomes a really good unit. That's when you become a really deep football team with depth that can withstand injuries. And so, got to do a good job of scouting and drafting when your pick comes in the draft. And so I look at day 2. I'm not going to keep you here very long as we're here in the draft zone. I don't want to keep you here long. I'm not going over every single pick in depth. I'm just going to run through the names of the second round draftees, third round draftees, and give you some tidbits, give you the guys that stand out, give you the players that I think make a great fit where they were drafted, and then we'll just get out of here. I'm not staying here at all for a very long time. I'm not going to stay on specific teams or, I'm just glossing over these picks. You can't see what's on my board. It's not for your eyes anyway. It's for mine. I know some of you are very perturbed and you're straining trying to see what's on my board. Don't worry about it. You don't need to see it. It's just for me. It's my notes so that I can relay the information to you. So I'm going to the big board for some help. Let's go over the second round draft picks quickly. 33, Houston takes Xavier Su'a-Filo. To me, I was upset because the Redskins were on the board right after them, first pick for them. They did not have a first round pick, and Xavier Su'a-Filo was on my radar, texting and say, "Hey, not so fast. He's ours. Back off." And so Redskins end up trading out of 34 to Dallas, who comes up and selects DeMarcus Lawrence. You lose one DeMarcus, you replace him with another. They come up and get DeMarcus Lawrence, a pass rusher out of Boise State. You look at Cleveland. I'm thinking, no doubt in my mind, after the news comes out about the Josh Gordon situation, Flash! Gordon is gone potentially for the season. I'm thinking there's no doubt that's Marquise Lee. They say, we're going to fortify this offensive line. Joel Bitonio, tackle out of Nevada, is their selection. So Cleveland not straying away from their board. They've got a game plan in mind, and they stuck to it. Raiders were smiling from ear to ear because they were afraid that someone was going to either trade up into the Redskins spot at 34, and the Cowboys did, but they weren't interested in the quarterback. They thought, well, maybe someone's going to try to trade up to Cleveland and slide in front of us and take Derek Carr. No one came and bit the bait. And so the Raiders were so happy to get their man, Derek Carr, at 36. He's going to be the heir apparent to the situation right now. And look, I'm not a big Matt Schaub fan. And so I don't think his time there is going to be a very enjoyable one for Raiders fans. I think he's on borrowed time. I think he's a space holder and a placeholder for Derek Carr. Carr could easily play this season. I think the Raiders have a game plan where they don't want him to see the field at all in 2015. If they had it their way, he wouldn't play, and then he could come in 2015 and be the presumed starter if he comes out and handles the playbook and is able to adjust to the speed of the game. I could see him starting in 2015. Much like the Jaguars came out and said about Blake Bortles. Their game plan is to have him sit for the entire 2014 season and play in 2015 as a starter. But it's easier said than done. You say that now, but you get into the season, you're 3-10 in week 14. I could easily see Blake Bortles getting off the pine and getting some starts. Same thing with the Raiders and Derek Carr. You move on to 37, Rashid Hegman. Here's a guy with first-round talent. Isn't always consistent, but when he's on at defensive tackle, there might not be a better one in the draft than Rashid Hegman. Falcons continue to get bigger and beefier up front. You look at Tampa Bay, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, ASJ, one of the most intriguing tight end prospects, big target. They've got a lot of big guys. I mean, when you get in the red zone, it's going to be hard to stop ASJ, Vincent Jackson, and Mike Evans, all 6'5" or better in the red zone. Good luck stopping those guys in the red zone, NFC South. Good luck. You look at Marquise Lee to the Jaguars at 39. To me, might be the best value of the second round. That is a heck of a pickup for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then all the trades start happening. You get a trade at 40. Seattle trades it up to Detroit. They come up and get Kyle Van Noy out of BYU. Then 41, there's another trade. Buffalo trades out. St. Louis comes up and gets LaMarcus Joyner, the safety out of Florida State. Then you go 42, another trade. Tennessee trades out. Philadelphia comes up, and they get Jordan Matthews. I thought this was a huge pickup for the Eagles here because, again, Jordan Matthews, to me, he doesn't play as fast as his 40 time indicates. He ran like a 4.44 40, which is stellar for a guy his size. We're talking about a 6'3" receiver. To me, he's a less crafty Larry Fitzgerald. He's not as polished as Larry Fitzgerald, but his hands are just as good, and he makes plays on the football. I don't think he plays as fast as his 40 time, but nonetheless, there's something to be said about Chip Kelly and liking big receivers. Here's a guy that comes in and I think fits what Chip Kelly likes to do. The Giants draft center Weston Richburg out of Colorado State here. We knew about all the struggles offensively for the Giants up front. He's going to help fortify that offensive line. You look at Buffalo, they get Cyrus Quandro. And remember, the Bills had traded back earlier in this round with St. Louis. And so they get Cyrus Quandro here. And I think it's a solid pick for the Bills. Again, I thought they could have went tackle early in the draft. They decided to come up, get Sammy Watkins, and they still find themselves getting great value here at 44 with Cyrus Quandro, a guy that many thought would be a first-round pick, and they get him in the second round. And so if he can stay healthy, if he's mentally stimulated and focused, they might have gotten themselves a really good tackle here in Quandro. You look at 45, the Seattle Seahawks, who had been trading back like crazy in this draft, trade up to get Paul Richardson, receiver out of Colorado. He's a burner. He's a guy that's going to stretch the field, take the top off the defense. Something that they really lack, that top end speed guy on their roster. He's going to provide them with that at 45 out of Colorado. 46, the Steelers continue to get big and revamp that defensive line, and for good reason. Stephon Tuitt, Notre Dame defensive end, excuse me. Here's a guy that is extremely athletic when he is fresh and he is running with that motor hot. He could easily be the best 5 technique in this draft. He's just got to continue to play with a high energy, a high motor. This guy is a special player when he's on, and the Steelers can. I really like what the Steelers did in this draft as a whole, and they continue to get better up front. And the Redskins traded back with Dallas, and so at 47 they take Trent Murphy, their first selection in the 2014 draft. Linebacker out of Stanford. You look at 48, Baltimore selects Timmy Jernigan. Here's a guy we talked about, potential first-round grade. I didn't think he was a first-round player, but a lot of people mentioned him as a first-round grade. I didn't see that, but the Ravens get a guy that they can put on that defensive line, and he's quicker than fast, and he's going to make a difference on that defensive line. The Jets get Jason Merrill, another target, and they need to add more targets, and I thought that they needed to do this. A lot of people talked about Ebron potentially going to them. They get a guy in Jason Merrill that had a lot of production in college at Texas Tech. You look at San Diego, they trade up with the Dolphins here, so they come up and get a position of need. And Jeremy Atachu out of Georgia Tech, here's a guy that played linebacker that they're going to ask to get off the edge and get pressure on the quarterback. And so that's a really good pickup for the Chargers. You look at the Bears, Ego Ferguson, defensive tackle out of LSU. He's a guy that it can get in there. LSU defensive line, you always get good players off of the LSU defensive line. Ego Ferguson, another guy. I thought that this was a little high for him maybe, but again, it's all in what you're looking for. The Bears saw him as a good fit for their defense. They went and got Ego Ferguson, defensive tackle out of LSU. You look at 52, Arizona, Troy Nicholas, tight end out of Notre Dame. I told you that in my mock draft that Bruce Arians loves the tight end position. And I really think, truly do believe that if Ebron was there at 20, he would have selected him. He was not. And so Arizona waits, and gets themselves a tight end, Troy Nicholas, out of Arizona. You look at 53, Green Bay. Devontae Adams, wide receiver out of Fresno State. That was the big target for Derek Carr at Fresno. And to me, Devontae Adams fits what a Green Bay Packer receiver is. Not flashy, not going to wow you with any of his measurables nor his attributes, but he's going to get the job done. You're throwing the football, he's going to catch it and try to make something happen thereafter. He fits in with what the Packers do. They lose James Jones, and they go get Devontae Adams. You look at Tennessee, Bishop Sankey. The relevance here, first running back selected in this draft at pick 54, the deepest into any NFL draft in history where a running back was taken. So no first round running back for the second consecutive year, first time that's ever happened. And now you come all the way into the second round, deep into the second round. We're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 picks deep into the second round. You get your first running back of the entire draft, Bishop Sankey out of Washington. And he's a guy that's going to come in and take the place of Chris Johnson. It's pretty simple. He's going to come in and probably be their running back, the starter, day one for this Tennessee Titans team. And he's probably the most versatile back in this draft, and with the ability to catch it, to run, speed, the boot, everything to match. And so a big pickup for them. And you knew this was going to happen. Once one came off the board, there was going to be a run on the running back position, because once one come off the board, then everyone's going to say, hey, let me get mine before all of them disappear. And so next pick, Cincinnati gets Jeremy Hill, big bruising back out of LSU, but it's a little bit more faster than people give him credit for. I think that the writing is on the wall for Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. Jeremy Hill, to me, is going to be the heir apparent to that throne in Cincinnati. Then you get a trade. San Francisco comes back and allows Denver to come up and select wide receiver out of Indiana, Cody Latimer. Remember, late in the draft process, the buzz at the receiver position was for Cody Latimer, the big height, weight, speed specimen out of Indiana. We're talking about a receiver that's every bit of 6'3", can run a 4.4 40, can leap out of the gym, can make all the big physical plays. He's just got to learn how to be a receiver, run better routes, you know, and learn all the nuances of the position. No better place to be than in Denver with Peyton Manning to do that. And so he is the draft pick of the Denver Broncos. Then you have the 49ers, who traded back out of that pick that I just mentioned, allowed Denver to come up and get Latimer. Well, they trade back up because, again, I talked about those runs on running backs. No pun intended. They come up, trade back, does the Dolphins, up comes the 49ers, and they select Carlos Hyde, running back out of Ohio State. Some thought he was the best running back in this draft. He ends up being the third running back taken and the third in the last 4 picks at 57 to the 49ers. Again, heir apparent to Frank Gore is going to be Carlos Hyde. And I don't know what the 49ers are doing out there, because remember, they took Lattimore last year, redshirted him. He's ready to go. And so I really don't know what they're doing. I don't know what their take is. I guess they're thinking you can't have too many backs. We like to run the football. We're just going to make sure we're stacked and have a fresh stable full of backs. Be interesting to see who the real heir apparent to Frank Gore is on that football team. You look at New Orleans at 58, Stanley John Baptiste, the big, lengthy, rangy corner out of Nebraska. Only 2 years of experience at the cornerback position. He's a big slab of clay. New Orleans hoping to mold him correctly. 59, the Indianapolis Colts, the last team in the NFL to make their first selection in this draft. Remember, no first round pick via the Trent Richardson trade. And so Jack Newhart, offensive lineman out of Ohio State. And I say offensive lineman because he played tackle. He's probably going to slide into guard, and center could be his best position. So he's a guy, jack of all trades. Don't know where he's going to play for this Indianapolis Colts football team. 60, the Carolina Panthers get Coney Ealy. And man, I had this guy in my first round mock. Now, I didn't expect him to go there, but I mocked him there anyway. At 16 to the Cowboys, they get him at 60. And so you got to think that's great value. There are some holes in his game, but the Panthers, much like the Giants in their heyday, continue to stockpile pass rushers and put guys on their roster that they feel can get to the quarterback. And we saw Seattle do it a season ago with these NASCAR units. It's nothing wrong with putting 4 guys on the field at once that can get to the quarterback. Makes it that much tougher on a team to stop you from getting to the quarterback and making it hard on them to complete passes. You get a trade here, Jacksonville, and I thought this was a wonderful trade by the Jaguars with the 49ers here. Coming up to 61, selecting wide receiver out of Penn State, Allen Robinson, height, weight, speed guy, can run a sub 4.5 40, is 6'3", can go up, make plays, run after the catch. I just love what the Jacksonville Jaguars did in round 2 of this draft. Honestly, the first 2 rounds, I thought the Jaguars, and honestly, looking at their entire draft, I'm in love with what the Jaguars did. I'll talk about that a little bit later. You move on to New England, and this was a bombshell in the second round. Patriots select Jimmy Garoppolo, quarterback out of Eastern Illinois. And we all heard about the comparisons to Tony Romo, being that that's the school Romo went to. We all have seen the quick release. If you watch the combine, the release is lightning quick. The footwork, everything looks clean from Garoppolo's standpoint. Just the production and, of course, the level of competition is what was really in question with him. And so he's going to New England. I'm thinking that they're about to trade Ryan Mallett and that he's going to be the heir apparent to Tom Brady in New England, and they want to groom him and they want to kind of mold him into the quarterback that they want him to be. And then I think that the Patriots, they might have nailed it there at 62 with Jimmy Garoppolo, quarterback out of Eastern Illinois. You look at the 49ers, once again, busy at work, trading away picks. Remember, they traded up with Miami to select Carlos Hyde. Well, the Dolphins now are making a selection where the 49ers would have Jarvis Landry, receiver out of LSU, arguably the better of the 2 receivers. I'm a Odell Beckham Jr. guy. I'm an ODB guy. But Jarvis Landry, to me, was right there with him. The only thing that he lacked was the top end speed. He didn't have the top end speed to match the production at school. And so I think that's what knocked him for a lot of people, was the lack of top end speed. If not for that, he's probably a guy we're mentioning as a first round pick. And so you get that kind of value late in the second round. He's going to do all the dirty work, do all the things that you want him to do. I love the pickup for the Dolphins, and I think that was a smart pickup by the Dolphins, because you just don't know what Mike Wallace is going to do out there. And you really don't know how Brandon Gibson is going to respond from that ACL tear. And so, again, you never can have enough receivers. I thought they fell off offensively when Brandon Gibson went down last year. A guy like Jarvis Landry is going to come in, potentially even start for you in 2014. You look at Seattle, Justin Britt. We thought that two of the biggest positions of need for this Seattle Seahawks team was going to be receiver, and it was going to be offensive line, mainly offensive line for them. And they go out and handle that with Justin Britt, a offensive lineman out of Missouri. And so I think that Justin Britt is a guy. He's versatile. If they need to, they can kick him inside the guard. If they want to, they can leave him outside at tackle. So it will be very interesting to see what Seattle has in mind and in store for Justin Britt. But that's a nice pickup for them at the end of round number 2. So that's round number 2. To me, you asked me best value in round 2. There's a lot of good selections here. Marquise Lee definitely stands out as some great value. Raiders getting a quarterback at 36 is some great value. I mean, you see the run on the running backs here. I mean, 49ers getting Carlos Hyde at 57 could turn out to be the steal of the draft potentially, much like we saw last year with Green Bay and Eddie Lacy late in the second round, getting some great value, ended up being the best running back coming out of that draft. So I could easily see Carlos Hyde making an impact like that. Jarvis Landry, for me, I think to get a guy like Landry, who many thought had first-round talent, just lacked the top-end speed, to get him late in the second round, I think the Dolphins really did well for themselves there. There's a lot of good value here in the second round. Again, you knew how I felt about this draft and how deep it was. And this second round kind of lends itself to that notion that there's a lot of talent in this draft. And so we move on from the second round to the third round in this draft. As we move on, you start with Houston in the third round, pick 65, C.J. Fedorowicz, Iowa tight end. He's an inline tight end, solid pickup. You move on to 66, Redskins make their second selection of this draft. Morgan Moses, tackle out of UVA. You get your first trade of the third round. Raiders trade back out of 67, allow the Dolphins to come up and select offensive tackle Billy Turner out of North Dakota State. You go to 68, the Atlanta Falcons draft Desmond Southward, safety out of Wisconsin. He's an interesting guy because he's a height, weight, speed specimen. And if they can get him to come in and use that speed and make some plays, hit some guys, he could be a nice fill-in at the safety position. You look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Charles Sims, running back out of West Virginia. I think he's the perfect complement to what they have in Doug E. Fresh in Tampa Bay. Here's a guy with a little bit of speed that can catch the football out of the backfield. Is, to me, the perfect third down back in this league. And so I think Tampa Bay envisions him being that guy. And if in a pinch, if they have the situation like they had a season ago where Dougie Fresh goes down, Sims can come in and be a workhorse for you. Don't think they envision him being that. But if he needs to be, he did that at West Virginia. You look at San Francisco, 70th pick in this draft. Marcus Martin, center out of USC. Great value. The last player left in the green room came out. And so 49ers definitely getting great value in this draft. You look at 71, the Cleveland Browns select Christian Kirksey, linebacker out of Iowa. 72, the Minnesota Vikings select Scott Crichton, defensive end out of Oregon State. Here's a guy that a lot of people liked a lot, thought he was going to be a second-round pick, ends up going in the third round. So the Vikings continuing to replenish that defensive line in the absence of Jared Allen. You look at Buffalo Bills, Preston Brown, linebacker out of Louisville. He's a thumper, but is a little bit more athletic than people give him credit for. Bills continuing to build a solid and stout defense in Orchard Park. 74, the Giants take Jay Bromley, defensive tackle, out of Syracuse. 75, St. Louis Rams select Trey Mason, running back, out of Auburn. We saw how well he played last season. He stepped up big, and the Rams, I think, look at him as the 1-2 punch with a guy that I thought played extremely well last year, and Zach Stacy. And so you couple those two together, they could make one of the better running back tandems in all of the National Football League. You look at the Detroit Lions at 76, taking Travis Swanson, center, out of Arkansas. The 77, San Francisco 49ers continue to get household names and good quality football players. They get Chris Borland, linebacker, out of Wisconsin. Again, we don't know what the status of their all-world linebacker Navarro Bowman is going to be leading up to the 2014 season. If he has to miss the first 6 weeks, if they got to keep him on the PUP list to start out the season, a guy like Chris Borland might be able to step in, and you may not miss a beat if you're the 49ers. And so you got to continue to love what the 49ers are doing with the draft. You move on to 78, Redskins. Third selection in this draft, second in the third round, via the Dallas Cowboys in that trade, select Spencer Long, guard, out of Nebraska. 79, the Baltimore Ravens select Terrence Brooks, safety, out of Florida State. At 80, the Jets select Dexter McDougal, cornerback, out of Maryland. At 81, the Oakland Raiders select Gabe Jackson, guard, out of Mississippi State. This is a big mauler, a big physical, nasty, space-eating guard. I think if you put him in a downhill run-blocking scheme, a power run-blocking scheme, this guy is exactly what you're looking for at the guard position. At 82, Chicago selects Will Sutton, defensive tackle, out of ASU. There's a trade here. Houston trading up with the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles trading back, allowing the Houston Texans to select Louis Nix, defensive tackle, out of Notre Dame. Here's a guy that many of us, including myself, had a first-round grade on. And sure, he's got some issues, with weight and what weight is he going to play at? Consistency, is the motor always going to be hot? But then again, what 340-pound defensive tackles, nose tackles, don't have a problem with motor outside of Vince Wilfork? I mean, if he can have a Vince Wilfork-like transformation to his career where he comes into the league and he's motivated on every single snap, because this guy isn't someone that's going to play 45, 50, 55 snaps like a Vince Wilfork can for you. This is a 30 snap a game guy. And if you drafted someone in the first round, hell, even in the second round, I need you to play 45, 50, 55, 60, 65 snaps if need be. And he's not at that level yet. His conditioning isn't where you want it to be. And that's something he's got to work on. And I think that's why he slipped and fell all the way to the third round. But the Texans see that as a gift. That's why they traded up with Philadelphia to get their hands on him. And they do. And I think they needed to get in front of Arizona. We knew the Arizona Cardinals. Darnell Dockett, not getting any younger, going to have a huge cap number here shortly. The Texans were probably a little afraid that the Cardinals might pull the trigger on him. And so they came up and got him. Move on to 84. To those very Arizona Cardinals, they select Kareem Martin, out of North Carolina, a defensive end that I think could actually stand up, play some outside linebacker. He's an interesting guy because he has the body type that could lend itself to him being a 5 technique. I also could see them asking him to stand up like they did Matt Shaughnessy a season ago. You look at Green Bay, Kyrie Thornton, defensive tackle, out of USM. You also move on to the Philadelphia Eagles at 86, Josh Huff, wide receiver, out of Oregon. Chip Kelly going back to his roots and selecting a receiver. You go to 87, Kansas City. Phillip Gaines, cornerback, out of Rice. This was a guy that I was enamored with. I wanted the Redskins to select this guy. A long corner, can make plays on the football. We're talking about a 4'4", 40 guy, 4'3", and some change 40 guy. Extremely fast, very athletic, very long for the corner position. I think he has some ball skills and some innate skills. I think he just has to work on some of his footwork and some of his technique, and he played at a school that the competition wasn't that great, and so there's some things to work on there. That's why he ended up being a third-round pick. But again, I think that there is some things to work with there, and you feel good about that pick if you are the Kansas City Chiefs. I like Phillip Gaines a lot. I'll be keeping my eye on him to see how he does in the National Football League. Cincinnati, Will Clark, defensive end out of West Virginia. He's a hybrid guy, kind of a tweener. We'll see how Cincinnati decides to use him. San Diego, Notre Dame guard Chris Watt goes to the Chargers here. And so looking to fortify that offensive line. At 90, the Indianapolis Colts select Dante Moncrief, wide receiver out of Ole Miss. At 91, the Arizona Cardinals select John Brown out of Pitt State. Remember this guy at the combine, at the wide receiver position, blazing fast. He reminds me of a poor man's Brandon Cooks. You look at this guy, very diminutive, probably about 5'9", 5'10" at max. Could be easily 5'8". Is extremely fast, fluid in and out of his breaks, really good hands. I can't wait to watch this guy get on the field and see how he is able to help transform this Arizona Cardinals offensive passing attack. 92, Carolina Panthers get Trey Turner, continue to build that offensive line in front of Cam Newton. This offensive line, to me, needed to be upgraded. And so you get a guy like Trey Turner to help you guard out of LSU. 93, the Patriots trade out of that pick. Remember, they traded up with Jacksonville earlier in the second round, and so Jags get the third round selection of the Patriots. They select Brandon Linder, guard out of Miami here. Someone said that this was somewhat of a reach here. Again, if it's your guy, get your guy when you feel the need to get your guy. And the Jaguars did exactly that at 93. 94, it's another trade. San Francisco traded with the Cleveland Browns here. And the Browns select running back Terrence West out of Townsend. And I thought that the Browns were going to select a running back in the second round. I thought that first pick in the second round was either going to be receiver or running back because they needed both, to me, desperately. And they said, nope, we need to tackle more. And so Terrence West, to me, is a really sound pick here. I like all of the skills he brings to the table. Not a top-end speed guy, but he brings power, he brings vision, he brings really good feet. I like this pick. Want to see what he does in Cleveland. He played in inclement weather at Townsend, had one of the best snow games I've ever seen. It was funny because I was actually at a party. I had no business watching this game because he played at a Division I AA school at Townsend, and I want to believe it was the championship game, matter of fact, or one of those playoff games. And I was at a party, and it was on the television. And, you know, I'm a football junkie, so I couldn't look away. And all I kept seeing was this guy breaking off run after run after run. And I'm like, who is this guy? And it was Terrence West, and he ends up being a third-round selection of the Cleveland Browns. At 95, the Denver Broncos select offensive tackle out of Michigan, Michael Schofield. You go to 96, the Minnesota Vikings select Jerick McKinnon, running back out of Georgia Southern. And this is an interesting pick, Jerick McKinnon is, because when I watched the combine, I remember seeing this guy, and he was blazing fast, and he was strong as well. I think he tossed up 20-some-odd reps at 2 1/4. He's a 4.3 and some change 40 type of guy. And not only is he a running back, but this guy also doubles as a corner. So you're getting some serious value here in Jerick McKinnon. And I think he's one of these guys that can play multiple positions on your team. Defense, offense, special teams, you name it, Jerick McKinnon can do that. And so, man, I'm anxious to see what the Vikings have in mind when they drafted him and what they're going to do with Jerick McKinnon, because he's one of those special breeds of athletes that can play multiple positions and do them equally well. So we'll see what he ends up being for the Minnesota Vikings. You look at 97 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers finally got the memo that they need speed on their football team. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the draft wrap-up of the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Dree Archer, running back out of Kent State, no one was faster than this guy at the combine. We all thought that he would challenge Chris Johnson's 40 time at the combine, and he did, but he did not break it, but he was close. And Dree Archer is an absolute blazer. He's a small guy. He's diminutive, but again, he's got speed, and you can't teach that. And he's got it in abundance, and I will love to see how the Pittsburgh Steelers use him, because he's a guy that can catch it out of the backfield. He can run it. You don't want to use this guy too much because he's small, he's frail. He'll get broken up if you overexert him and you overuse him. But if he's used in moderation, like I envision the Steelers using him, he's going to be one heck of a player in the National Football League. So you move on to Green Bay, 98. Richard Rodgers, tight end out of Cal. 99, the Ravens select Crockett Gilmore, tight end out of Colorado University. And finally, the 49ers select Brandon Thomas, guard at Clemson, at pick 100. Remember, he is the guy that tore his ACL in a workout for one of these teams leading up to the draft. And so 49ers basically drafted him as a redshirt player, someone that they could draft and stash. He's not going to count against their roster this year. And so 49ers, with all the picks that they have, you know everyone can't make the roster. They've got to make picks like this. And so down the line, Brandon Thomas is a guy you'll hear from, much like they did last season with, Marcus Lattimore, a guy that they had no intentions of playing. They knew he was rehabbing from a knee injury, so they drafted him, stashed him away. Now he's ready to rock and roll in 2014, and so they're looking to do the same thing with Brandon Thomas. And so that's day 2 of the draft right there in a nutshell, rounds 2 and 3. You look at round 3, and I guess best value here, looking at this board, man, there are some really good players that were selected. And again, I keep repeating myself. I sound like a broken record with all of the talent that is in this draft. But if I'm looking at this board and I want to tell you who I feel like they got the most value in this round, I'd have to say it was the 49ers. Getting Marcus Martin in the 3rd round, a center that might be the most NFL ready of all the centers in this draft. I know Weston Richburg went to the Giants earlier in the 2nd round, but Marcus Martin is huge. He's big. He's athletic. I think he's a great fit in what the 49ers like to do. You turn around and you couple that with a guy like Chris Borland out of Wisconsin. I think that's some great value there for the 49ers in those 2 players. You look at a guy like Scott Crichton for Minnesota, and you couple him with another pick in Jerick McKinnon. I think the Vikings might have gotten some really good value in the 3rd round as well. And I think Louis Nix, to me, of all the teams, of all the players, might be the most value, though, in this round for the Texans. If they can get the most out of him, get him to play with a sense of urgency, get him conditioning-wise to be where they want him to be, I think he could be the steal of the 3rd round, potentially of this draft, if he is as advertised as he was at Notre Dame. So, at times at Notre Dame. So, that's the day 2 of the 2014 NFL Draft, rounds 2 and 3. A lot of guys came off the board, a lot of really good football players that have bright futures ahead of them. I wanted to really break down the first 2 days of the draft, not getting into day 3. A lot happened there. I'll start doing the draft breakdowns. Of course, I'm starting with the team that I felt had the best total draft in 2014. And after that, we're going with the Who's Next format. So be ready. As my old high school and middle school coach used to say, son, be ready. Be ready to be the first to make the comment in the box next in the team that you want to see next. So you know how this goes. If you're here in the lab room, you see this face, then you know that whether it's big or small, we cover it all here in the lab room. This has been another edition of In the Lab Room's Draft
Zone.
Like the content? Want more? Sub up.